But why is he angry about this, and why is he calling you about it?
So the phone call was actually on another topic, and then in the middle of it, he started railing about this story. He has, in the middle of this phone conversation, he said they found the records and it landed in a field and, indicated that he was going to release them. And I said that I would love to see them, and he made fun of me asking that in a sort of child sing-song voice, and then said he was probably going to sue. He said I didn't write the story, but I assume he meant the paper.
As Vice President Harris continues to dominate the 2024 election, Donald Trump's entire world is collapsing around him, which is probably the reason why he personally called a New York Times reporter, yelled at her, and threatened to sue the New York Times because they dared fact-check something he said at a recent press conference. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we have several clips to talk about in this video, but I do want to set the stage as a reminder for what happened. This is a clip from the recent disastrous press conference by Donald Trump, the emergency press conference at Mar-a-Lago, in which he makes a claim which was then disputed and fact-checked by the New York Times and some of the people listed in the claim.
Please.
President, there's been some discussion around Vice President Harris's relationship with Willie Brown, former mayor of San Francisco, and how that might have intersected with her career trajectory. So I'm just wondering if you followed that discussion at all and had any thoughts on it.
Well, I know Willie Brown very well. In fact, I went down in a helicopter with him. We thought maybe this is the end. We were in a helicopter going to a certain location together, and there was an emergency landing. This was not a pleasant landing, and Willie was he was a little concerned. So I know him pretty well. I mean, I haven't seen him in years. But he told me terrible things about her. But this is what you're telling me anyway, I guess.
So again, what he's saying is former San Francisco Mayor Willie Brown was in a helicopter with Donald Trump. During the helicopter ride, they had to make an emergency landing. And also during the emergency landing and helicopter ride, Willie Brown reportedly talked smack about now Vice President Kamala Harris, whom Willie Brown used to date. That is the context for this, okay? Well, the New York Times fact-checked it because it was disputed, and we'll get into the particular disputes in a second, but I'm just going to skip to the punchline and let you hear directly from Maggie Haberman, a highly reputable New York Times columnist who has very close associations with Trump world. Trump has repeatedly engaged with her. She is recounting a phone call that she had personally from Trump in which he yelled at her, berated her, and threatened to sue her and the paper.
20th on the moments from yesterday's news conference, but why is he angry about this, and why is he calling you about it?
So the phone call was actually on another topic, and then in the middle of it, he started railing about this story because the New York Times and other publications wrote about the fact that Willie Brown, as you know, said it on CNN too, says this did not happen. Trump got asked about Willie Brown, and he brought up this helicopter story. And what I learned today is that Trump put this story in his 2023 book, Letters to Trump. One of the letters he included was from Willie Brown. They knew each other in the 1990s, and he referenced this alleged helicopter emergency landing. Fine. Nobody noticed it at the time. His issue is with Willie Brown, who is saying that this didn't happen. But in the middle of it, he said that in the middle of this phone conversation, he said they found the records and it landed in a field and, indicated that he was going to release them. And I said that I would love to see them, and he made fun of me asking that in a sort of child sing-song voice, and then said he was probably going to sue. He said I didn't write the story, but I assume he meant the paper for writing about this. If he has records, he should show them. What I thought was most interesting about this conversation, although certainly if he has these records, we would write about it. It'd be interesting, was that he was focusing on this because that is what we have seen him do historically when he is in times of stress.
What do you mean?
So you heard it right. So Donald Trump personally calls a New York Times reporter, berates her, yells at her, and then mocks her when he says he has evidence and she asks to see the evidence of a claim that has been disputed by the other witness in the alleged story, Willie Brown. Classic Trump. I can totally prove election fraud. I'll totally turn over my taxes. And then he never does. So if you have the goods, just show it. The New York Times is so not partisan. We've talked about this before. They have a reputation in right-wing media for being, that liberal rag, the New York Times. They're in the pocket of Democrats. They post as many critical stories about President Biden, the Biden-Harris administration, as they ever have of Trump. As a matter of fact, they, like most elements of the mainstream media, grade Donald Trump on a curve. Maggie Haberman Again, certainly a very accomplished journalist, but she herself has done some terrible things, in my opinion. Like, she basically sat on certain stories to release them later as part of a book she was writing, right? I mean, these people grade Donald Trump on a curve and try to use him to further their career. So it's not like they are completely hostile to him. I wouldn't be surprised if many reporters, even if they disagree with Trump personally and politically, are really anticipating and excited for the notion of him to be back in power, because at least until he begins investigating them and sicking the DOJ on them, as he's promised to do, it'll certainly generate clicks and headlines. So she's like, hey, bring me the damn evidence. We'll publish it. We'll talk about it. And he's like, oh, bring you the evidence with it. Classic Trump. But again, he's so triggered about this such minuscule thing. All the claims against Trump, all of the terrible, stupid things that Donald Trump has said, this is among the least important, but he's so fixated on it precisely for the reason Maggie Haberman says. He tends to do these things and like lash out and latch on to these particular minor issues in moments of, quote, high stress. The problem for Trump is that Willie Brown, the former mayor of San Francisco, has publicly, repeatedly disputed the claims in the story that he was ever in a helicopter with Trump, that they ever made an emergency landing, and that he ever said anything inappropriate about Kamala Harris. And we're going to play two clips in which Willie Brown publicly says these things.
Just to clear things up, have you ever been in a helicopter that made an emergency landing with Donald Trump?
No.
Have you ever been in a helicopter with Donald Trump?
No.
He is apparently tonight getting angry about all of this, calling the New York Times and berating them for their story on this, claiming, he says, we have the flight records of the helicopter, and apparently said the helicopter landed in a field. You have no memory of anything like that ever happening?
No.
What could he possibly be thinking about?
I have no idea.
So, again, seems pretty clear cut. But again, Willie Brown also disputed the other major claim in Trump's story, which is that he disparaged Vice President Kamala Harris, whom Willie Brown reportedly used to date.
Another thing that Donald Trump said at this news conference was that you had said derogatory things about Vice President Kamala Harris to him in conversation. Have you ever had a conversation like that with Donald Trump?
No, I have not. Nor anybody else.
It sounds like, at least according to you, this entire story, including the helicopter, the near emergency landing, and the conversation about now Vice President Kamala Harris, it just never happened.
Never happened. Period.
There you go. You have Donald Trump, malignant narcissist, pathological liar, guy who lied a record-breaking 35,000 times, between 30 and 35,000 times when he was president of the United States, a staggering sum. And Willie Brown. Now, I suppose it's possible there's Brown lying in this particular situation, but we should never afford Donald Trump the benefit of the doubt, particularly when he claims he has evidence, but seems hostile at the notion of producing the evidence that he says he has and that he wants to produce. I have the evidence. I'm going to show it to you. Okay, show it to me. What do you mean show it to you? Just Donald Trump being a contrarian moron. But again, very interesting that Vice President Harris is dominating in the polls, dominating in the fundraising, dominating in the energy, giving speeches to packed stadiums filled with tens of thousands of people. And this is the thing that Donald Trump wants to focus on. Very interesting stuff. As Maggie Haberman, again, somebody who has profoundly tight connections inside the Trump administration, Trump campaign. I mean, this is how she really reemerged in the public consciousness as being the Trump whisperer and having all these bombshell stories about Trump world given her access. She says this is proof that he is unraveling. And I completely agree. I think it is, which is good for Democrats because that makes him even more vulnerable politically. Let me know what you think in the comments.